I spent 12 years building my father's construction company from the ground up. 12 years of early mornings, late nights, and weekends sacrificed. But no matter how hard I worked, I was always the second son. My older brother Trevor could do no wrong in Dad's eyes, even though he barely showed up half the time. I kept telling myself it would change, that eventually my father would see my worth. Then came the day he looked me in the eye and said, "If you do not like how I run things, there is the door." So I walked through it. Before we dive into what happened when I finally walked through that door, I want to know where you are watching from. Drop your city in the comments below. And if you have ever felt like the second choice in your own family, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you will want to see how this plays out when the golden child cannot deliver, and Dad has nowhere else to turn. I was 12 years old the first time Dad took me to a construction site. It was a Saturday morning in July, hot enough that the asphalt felt soft under my sneakers. The site was for a small office building on the east side of town. Dad had his blueprint rolled out on the hood of his truck, and I remember thinking it looked like a treasure map. He called Trevor over first. My brother was 16 then, already tall and confident in that way that made adults think he had it all figured out. Dad spent 20 minutes explaining how to read the measurements, how to understand the symbols for electrical and plumbing. Trevor nodded along, but I could see his fingers tapping against his leg, itching to pull out his phone. When Dad finally turned to me, Trevor had already wandered off to sit in the truck with the air conditioning on. Dad sighed but did not call him back. Instead, he started over with me, showing me how to hold the blueprint so the sun would not wash out the details, teaching me to trace the load-bearing walls with my finger. I pulled out the little notebook Mom had given me and started writing everything down. Dad raised an eyebrow but kept teaching. That became our pattern. Trevor got the first explanation, the prime attention. I got the leftovers. But I took those leftovers and studied them until I knew them cold. Fast forward 20 years. I am 32 now, and I have been working at Richardson Construction full-time since I was 20. I skipped college because Dad needed help, he said. Trevor went to State University, partied for 4 years, barely graduated, then came back to work at the company anyway. Somehow he still got the better office. By this point I was managing 3 major projects simultaneously. The Riverside Plaza renovation, the Millbrook apartment complex, and the Cedar Street commercial development. I knew every subcontractor by name, every permit requirement, every supplier's delivery schedule. I worked 80-hour weeks and never complained because I thought eventually Dad would notice. The Riverside Plaza project was my pride and joy. It was an old shopping center that needed a complete overhaul. The client had a tight budget, and everyone said it could not be done without cutting corners. But I spent 3 months negotiating with suppliers, finding alternative materials that met code but cost less, redesigning the layout to maximize the existing structure. I saved that client $200,000 and brought the project in 2 weeks early. I was so proud. I put together a detailed presentation, printed it out on good paper, even practiced what I would say. Friday night was family dinner at my parents' house, like always. I figured that would be the perfect time to share the news. Mom's pot roast filled the house with that warm, comfortable smell. Dad sat at the head of the table, same spot he had occupied for 40 years. Mom was to his right. Trevor and his wife, Amber, sat across from me. I waited until we had finished eating until Mom brought out her apple pie before I cleared my throat. "I have some good news about Riverside," I said, pulling out my folder. "We came in under budget by $200,000. I managed to renegotiate with the steel supplier and found a concrete vendor who gave us a bulk discount. The client is thrilled. They are already talking about having us bid on their next 2 properties." Dad nodded, cutting into his pie. "That is good, Jake. Good work." I waited for more. There was not any more. Trevor leaned back in his chair, that familiar smirk on his face. "Yeah, but did you check the permit fees? I heard they might spike next quarter. Could eat into those savings." Dad's head snapped up like Trevor had just solved world hunger. "Good thinking, son. Always looking ahead. That is the kind of strategic planning we need." I felt something crack inside my chest, but I just smiled and said I would look into it. I already had looked into it. The permit fees were locked in for 18 months, but Dad did not ask me that. The conversation moved on. Amber talked about redecorating their living room. Mom asked about everyone's plans for the upcoming holiday. I sat there pushing pie around my plate, that folder of accomplishments, getting condensed water rings from my glass. Then Dad dropped the bomb. "I have got some news too," he said, setting down his fork with that decisive click that meant he had made up his mind about something. "We just landed the Winchester Shopping Center project. $3 million contract. Biggest thing we have done in 5 years." My heart jumped. I had been preparing for this. Winchester was the project every construction company in the state had wanted. I had contacts with half the vendors we would need. I had driven by the site a dozen times, making notes. I had even sketched out some preliminary ideas for the timeline. "Trevor," Dad continued, and my heart stopped jumping. "I want you to lead this one." The room went quiet, except for the tick of Mom's grandmother clock in the hallway. "Dad," I said carefully, "I have been preparing for this. I have the connections, the experience with projects this size. I have already talked to the Winchester people at that industry mixer last month." "You have had plenty of opportunities," Dad said, not even looking at me. "Trevor needs the chance to grow. He has been ready for something like this." Trevor had been ready. Trevor who showed up at 9 and left by 4. Trevor who I had covered for more times than I could count. Trevor who had never managed anything bigger than a residential duplex. "Do not worry, little bro," Trevor said, grinning. "I will let you handle the paperwork. You are good at that stuff." I wanted to flip the table. Instead, I folded my napkin, placed it next to my plate, and excused myself early. Mom looked worried, but Dad was already discussing timeline with Trevor. I should have seen what was coming. I really should have. 2 weeks into the Winchester project, my phone started ringing. First, it was Jim Kowalski, the electrical subcontractor. "Your brother has not returned any of my calls. We need approval on the panel placement by Wednesday, or we are going to fall behind schedule." "I will take care of it," I said, like I always did. Then it was the cement supplier, then the site inspector, then the architect. Trevor was ghost. I would see his truck in the parking lot some mornings, but he was never at the site meetings. Never returning emails. Never making decisions. I confronted him in his office on a Thursday afternoon. "The Winchester project is falling apart," I said. "Where have you been?" He did not even look up from his computer. "I have been busy with other things. You could have handled those calls." "I am not the project lead, Trevor. You are. These people need decisions from you. Then make the decisions and I will sign off on them. That is what teamwork is, right?" I wanted to grab him by his expensive collar and shake him. Instead, I went to Dad. Dad was in his office, reviewing quotes. I knocked, walked in, and closed the door behind me. "We need to talk about Winchester." "What about it? Trevor is not doing his job. The subcontractors cannot get hold of him. We are going to miss deadlines." Dad sighed like I was bothering him about something trivial. "So help him out. That is what family does, Jake. I have been helping him out. I have been doing his job while he does God knows what. This is a $3 million project, Dad. We cannot afford for it to fail. It will not fail. Trevor just needs support while he finds his footing. He has had 2 weeks to find his footing. We are about to lose the electrical contractor. Then fix it." Dad's tone was final. "Make sure your brother succeeds. That is your job. My job. To make sure Trevor succeeded. Not to succeed myself. To make Trevor look good. I fixed it. I spent the next week working 16-hour days. I smoothed things over with the subcontractors. I reworked the schedule. I found a new cement supplier when the first one dropped us, because Trevor had ignored their invoices. I brought the Winchester project back from the edge of disaster. When I presented the recovery plan to Dad, Trevor sitting right there in the office, Dad nodded approvingly. "Good work, Trevor. I knew you could turn it around." Jake helped, Trevor offered like he was being generous. "That is what brothers do," Dad said. Something inside me went numb. But it got worse. 3 days later, the Winchester client called an emergency meeting. Apparently, Trevor had promised them upgrades that were not in the contract and would cost an additional $400,000. He had not consulted anyone. He had not checked the budget. He had just promised. The client was furious when we said we could not deliver. They threatened to pull the entire contract. $3 million about to walk away because Trevor wanted to impress someone at a cocktail party. I spent 2 days on the phone negotiating, explaining, offering alternatives. I finally convinced them to accept a scaled-down version of the upgrades at cost, which meant we would make almost nothing on that portion of the job, but at least we would keep the contract. When I told Dad what had happened, I expected him to finally see it. Finally understand that Trevor was a liability. Instead, Dad said, "Make sure Trevor gets credit for saving the relationship. He is the project lead." I stood there in his office, the same office where I had spent countless hours learning this business, and something broke. Not dramatically, not with shouting or tears. It was quiet, like a rope fraying through its last thread. "Dad," I said, my voice steady, "we need to talk. This is not fair. I have been carrying this company while Trevor coasts." "Fair?" Dad stood up, his face reddening. "I built this company from nothing. I decide what is fair. And I have been building it with you for over a decade. When does that matter? Trevor is your older brother. He deserves respect. He deserves the chance to lead. Respect is earned, not given because of birth order." "Watch your tone," Dad snapped. "I am still your father, and I am still your son, the one who shows up, the one who fixes the problems, the one who actually cares about this company's reputation." Dad's jaw clenched. "If you do not like how I run things, there is the door." The words hung in the air between us. I could see he expected me to back down. Apologize. Fall back in line, like I always had. Instead, I felt calm. Eerily calm. "You are right, Dad," I said quietly. "There is a door, and I am walking through it." His eyes widened. "You do not mean that." "I do. Effective immediately, I am done. You want Trevor to lead, let him, without me cleaning up his messes." "Jake, you are being emotional." "No," I said, heading for the door. "I am being clear. For the first time in my life, I am being clear. You want to see what this company looks like when Trevor actually has to do the work. You are about to find out. You will regret this," Dad called after me. "You are nothing without this company." I stopped at the door, looked back at him. "Maybe," I said, "but I would rather be nothing than be invisible here." I walked out, past the secretary who had known me since I was a kid, past the conference room where I had spent so many late nights, past Trevor's empty office. I cleaned out my desk in 10 minutes. 12 years fit into 2 cardboard boxes. I did not cry. I did not rage. I just left. That night I sat in my apartment staring at those 2 boxes. 32 years old. No college degree. My entire adult life had been that company. What the hell was I supposed to do now? My phone buzzed. Text from Mom. "Your father is very upset. Please reconsider." I turned my phone face down. But the next morning I woke up and felt something I had not felt in years. Space. Room to breathe. Like I had been wearing a jacket 2 sizes too small and finally took it off. I called Marcus Reed. We had gone to high school together, stayed in touch over the years. He had gone into real estate development, done pretty well for himself. We met for coffee at a place downtown mid-morning, when the rush had cleared out. "I heard you left Richardson," Marcus said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "Small town word travels." "I quit," I corrected. "There is a difference." "Good for you, man. I have been waiting for you to break free from that place." "I need work," I said. "I cannot just sit around." Marcus leaned back, studying me. "How do you feel about consulting? I have got a mixed-use development breaking ground next month. Could use someone who knows their way around a construction timeline and has actual vendor relationships." "I am listening." 3-month contract. You coordinate between my team and the contractors. Make sure everything stays on schedule and under budget. I will pay you $5,000 a month plus a bonus if we come in early. It was less than I had been making, but it was something. And it was mine. Smaller scale, but Marcus actually listened to my ideas. When I suggested switching the window supplier to save money without sacrificing quality, he said, "That is brilliant. Do it." When I caught a potential delay with the permits and worked around it, he sent a company-wide email crediting me by name. It was the first time in 12 years someone had said, "This was Jake's idea," and actually meant it as praise. Word spread. Small community, like Marcus said. By the end of the first month, I had 2 other developers asking if I had time for side consultations. By the end of the second month, I was working 60 hours a week again, but this time for myself. Then Diana Hartwell called. Diana was a legend in the regional development scene. She had built 4 major luxury properties in the state and had a reputation for excellence and for chewing up contractors who disappointed her. I had met her once briefly at an industry conference 3 years ago. I was shocked she remembered my name. Jake Richardson, she said when I answered. I hear you are doing independent consulting now. Yes, ma'am, I said. As of about 6 weeks ago. I have a project. Luxury condos, waterfront property. 40 units. The contractor I hired is an idiot, and I am about to fire him. I need someone who can come in, assess the damage, and tell me honestly if it can be salvaged or if I need to start over. Are you interested? Absolutely. I will pay you $10,000 for 2 weeks of assessment work. If I like what you propose, we will talk about you managing the whole project. Deal? Deal. I spent 2 weeks at that property. The contractor had indeed made a mess of things, but it was salvageable. I put together a 40-page proposal detailing exactly how to get it back on track, including a realistic timeline and a budget breakdown. Diana read it in one sitting while I waited in her office. When she finished, she looked up at me and said, "You have vision, and you are honest. Those are rare qualities. Let us work together. Full project management. $500,000 contract." I almost dropped my coffee. We signed papers the next day. I hired an accountant, set up an LLC, rented a small office. I was terrified and exhilarated at the same time. Meanwhile, back at Richardson Construction, things were imploding. I heard it through the grapevine. Jim Kowalski, the electrical contractor, called me to ask if I was taking on new projects. When I said yes, he said, "Good, because I am done working with your brother. He is impossible. No communication, no follow-through. I am walking off Winchester next week." The window supplier called. The concrete vendor called. All saying the same thing. Trevor was not returning calls, was not making decisions, was not managing the project. Could they work with me instead? I referred them to other contractors. It was not my circus anymore. 2 weeks after I had walked out, after I had signed the contract with Diana, my doorbell rang at 8:30 on a Saturday night. I was not expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and my stomach dropped. Dad stood on my doorstep. He looked older than I had ever seen him. Tired. Smaller somehow. I opened the door. We stared at each other. "Jake," he said. "We need to talk." I stepped aside, let him in. Offered him water. He shook his head, sat heavily on my couch. "The company is falling apart," he said without preamble. "Trevor cannot handle Winchester. We have lost 2 other major contracts because clients heard what a disaster it is. I have been trying to manage it myself, but I cannot be on site like I used to be. My doctor says my blood pressure is through the roof." I sat in the chair, across from him, and said nothing. "I was wrong, Dad," continued the words, clearly difficult. "I was wrong to favor Trevor. I was wrong to dismiss your work. I was wrong to tell you to leave." He looked up at me, and I saw something I had never seen before. Fear. "I need you back, Jake. Please. The company needs you. I need you. Name your terms." The moment felt surreal. 12 years I had wanted this. Wanted him to see me, value me, need me. And now that it was here, I felt nothing but tired. "I am not coming back, Dad." His face went pale. "What I said, I am not coming back." "But I just said name your terms. Anything you want." "I have my own clients now," I explained. "People who value my work from the start, not after everything falls apart. I do not need the company anymore, but it is your legacy." "Your grandfather started this company." "It was never my legacy," I said. "It was always Trevor's in your eyes. You made that clear every single day for 12 years. I was wrong to favor him. I see that now. You see it now because the company is failing. It took almost losing everything for you to notice I existed. That tells me everything I need to know. Jake, please." I stood up. "I am not coming back as your employee. but I will consult on specific projects if you pay my rate. $300 an hour, minimum 10-hour commitment per project. I will help you save Winchester if you want. But I will not be invisible anymore. I will not be the one who works twice as hard for half the credit. Those days are over. Dad stared at me like I was a stranger. Take it or leave it, I said. He took it. 6 months later, I was sitting in my own office. Not a big office, but it was mine. I had 3 employees now, 2 project managers and an administrative assistant. We had just signed a $2 million contract for a mixed-use development downtown. My business was growing faster than I had dared to hope. I still consulted for Richardson Construction occasionally. Dad paid my rate without complaint. We had saved Winchester barely, and Dad had installed an actual project manager to oversee Trevor. Trevor hated it, but he did not have a choice. The company survived, though it was smaller now. Dad had to turn down projects he could not staff properly. Our relationship had changed. We were not estranged, but we were not close either. We were professional. He called me for advice sometimes. I gave it honestly and charged him for it. Mom worried that we would never be the same. She was right. We would not be. But what we had now was built on respect, not resentment. That was better. The hardest part was not the business side. That fell into place faster than I expected. The hardest part was unlearning the voice in my head that said I was not good enough, that I needed Dad's approval to matter. Diana Hartwell helped with that. She became more than a client, she became a mentor. One afternoon after a successful site inspection, we grabbed coffee and she asked me how I was really doing. I am okay, I said. Better than okay. But sometimes I still catch myself wanting to call my dad and tell him about a win, wanting his approval. Diana nodded. That is normal. But you know what I have learned. You cannot force someone to see your worth. Sometimes you have to show it to yourself first. Your father was blind to your value for years. That was his failing, not yours. I know that now. Good. Because you are talented, Jake. You are going to build something great. And you are going to do it on your own terms. She was right. Working with Marcus taught me that collaboration could be joyful. Working with Diana taught me that high standards and respect were not mutually exclusive. Building my own company taught me that I was capable of more than I had ever imagined. I was not angry anymore. I had been for a while. But anger is exhausting, and I had better things to do with my energy. I still saw Trevor occasionally. He had not changed much. Still coasting, still making excuses. But that was not my problem anymore. Dad had to manage that himself. The other day I drove past the old Richardson construction office. I felt nothing. No longing, no bitterness. It was just a building where I used to work. That is when I knew I was free. Walking away was the hardest thing I ever did. But it was also the most liberating. I learned that family love should not come with the price of your self-respect. I learned that being the second choice taught me to become my own first choice. I do not regret those 12 years. They taught me the business. They taught me what I was capable of. They also taught me what I will not accept. If there is one thing I want you to take from this story, it is this. You cannot wait for other people to validate your worth. Not your parents, not your siblings, not anyone. You have to know it yourself. And when you really know it, you will stop accepting scraps and start building your own table. Freedom is not about getting revenge. It is about refusing to let someone else's blindness define your vision. Dad got his wake-up call when the company almost collapsed. Trevor got a reality check when he could not deliver. And I got my life back. The door was not just an exit. It was the entrance to the life I was meant to build all along. So if you are reading this, and you are the one always passed over, always doing more but getting less, ask yourself this. What would your life look like if you stopped waiting for permission to matter? What could you build if you walked through that door? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? How did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one, and your experience might help someone else who is struggling with the same choice. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe so you do not miss the next one, and share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone who has been the invisible one for too long. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it gave you the courage to claim your own worth. Take care of yourselves out there. You deserve better than being second best. Remember that.